Well, butter my biscuit, Dolly here. Switchboards LIT, we got stories backed up. Today's theme is malicious compliance, honey, and oh my stars. These folks followed instructions to the absolute letter, and it is delicious. Got 5 calls queued up, and our celebrities are standing by. Let's get into it, darling.
First up, we got a story about somebody's boss deleting a perfectly good spreadsheet and demanding everybody do things his way. Sounds like a job for Hank Hill. Let me patch him through right now.
Hank Hill speaking.
Hank, honey, I got a story here about an event planner whose boss threw out her whole organized system and told her to do it his way. I think you're going to have some feelings about this one.
Well, all right then. Go ahead and lay it on me, Dolly. So there's this fella, or gal, been running a big annual event for years, knows every detail, got everything organized in a real clean spreadsheet, like a proper ledger. Names, food needs, travel, all of it. Set up neat as a whistle, the way it ought to be done. I tell you what, that kind of organization is something I appreciate. When I do the Strickland Propane Company picnic, I got a list. Dated, laminated, checked twice. Dale tried to take over 1 year and we ran out of buns. Never again. Now here's where it goes sideways. The boss, who by all accounts does not actually do much of anything, sees the spreadsheet and just deletes the whole dadgum thing. No conversation, no warning, just gone. Replaces it with some raw form response setup that feeds straight from a survey. Says it's more automated. More automated. Sweet Lord. Now hold on just a dadgum minute. You don't delete another man's spreadsheet. That is somebody's work. That is hours of careful thinking right there. If Bill Dowderiv spent 3 hours organizing the neighborhood watch schedule and I just erased it, Peggy'd have my hide, and she'd be right. So this worker explains, real politely, that the boss's way won't work. People cancel, they add guests, flights change, dietary stuff gets complicated. You need a clean sheet to manage all that. Boss waves it off, says do it my way. So she does, exactly his way. Every messy duplicate, every 4 flights crammed in one cell, every food allergy dumped in a pile with no labels. That's the kind of thing that happens when you let a fella who can't run a lawnmower try to redesign the whole yard. Bobby tried to mow the lawn in a diagonal pattern once because he saw it on TV. I walked behind him and fixed every row. You do not mess with a system that works. The boss tries to use his masterpiece of a sheet to present something to upper management, and he can't filter a single thing. Can't find who's got a nut allergy, can't sort the flights, can't tell who canceled. The whole thing is a mess. Meanwhile, this worker had already quietly rebuilt the real spreadsheet on her own drive and was using that the whole time. Ha, that is the kind of quiet dignity I respect right there. That ain't mean, that ain't spiteful. That's just a professional person keeping the real work going while the boss fumbles around with his fancy idea that doesn't work. Bobby would never pull something as foolish as that boss did, and Bobby once tried to make a quesadilla in the toaster.
Now listen here. There is a right way and a wrong way to run things, and the right way usually involves a clean system you can actually read without squinting. This boss did what bad bosses always do. He saw something that worked, decided his ego knew better, blew up the whole operation, and then got surprised when it didn't work. That is not leadership. That is what happens when a man who doesn't know propane tries to tell a propane professional how to fill a tank. You end up with a mess, and somebody, usually the person who knew what they were doing to begin with, has to clean it up quietly without getting any credit. That worker deserves a raise and an apology. In that order.
Should have been propane. Clean, efficient, no wasted steps. That's how you run an event.
Ha! Hank Hill never misses with a propane take. All right, darlings. Next story is about a call center worker whose manager kept giving verbal instructions that weren't exactly by the book, and this worker started keeping receipts. I'm ringing up Gordon Ramsay for this one.
Gordon here. What is it?
Chef, I got a juicy one. A worker kept getting blamed for following his manager's off-the-record instructions, so he started sending confirmation emails after every single conversation. You're going to love where this ends up.
Right, I'm listening. Go on then. So there's a manager, call him Derek, who loves to tell his staff to cut corners verbally. Skip this step, handle the refund this way, move faster. But whenever the written procedures say something different, does Derek put his little instructions in writing? No, he waves you off and says, trust me, I'll back you up. Classic. Absolutely classic Muppet behavior. Bloody hell. I have cooked alongside chefs who pulled this exact move. They whisper, oh, just skip the resting time on the beef, it'll be fine. And then when the beef comes out grey and chewy and the customer sends it back, suddenly they were never in the kitchen. Suddenly it was your beef, you donkey. So this worker gets flagged in quality reviews 3 separate times for following Derek's little whispered instructions, 3 times, at which point the worker starts sending a confirmation email after every single verbal order. Just to confirm, you told me to do this in situation like this, correct? Simple, elegant, devastating. Oh, that is a properly seasoned move right there. That is the mise en place of professional self-preservation. Every ingredient measured, every step documented, everything in its correct place before service begins. Derek didn't see it coming because Derek clearly has never run a proper kitchen in his life. Derek never responds to a single one of these emails. Not one correction, not one reply, not even a read receipt. 2 months of this. Then a bigger problem blows up. Something gets escalated, and in the meeting, Derek looks this worker in the eye and says, I never told you to do it that way. Bold, raw, completely undercooked. Oh, for God's sake. The audacity, the sheer breathtaking audacity of that man. 14 emails, 14, time-stamped, sequential, sent within minutes of each conversation, all ignored, all in the inbox. That is not a paper trail. That is a full 5-course tasting menu of your own guilt, Derek, and you are now being asked to eat every single course. The worker forwards the entire email chain in the meeting. The room goes silent. Derek says the emails didn't reflect the full context. His own manager asked Derek to explain the full context. Derek cannot do that. 6 weeks later, Derek is moved sideways into a different role. The worker keeps sending follow-up emails to this day. Beautiful. That is the cleanest plating I have seen outside of a 2-star kitchen. Precise, elegant, 0 waste. Right, listen, in my kitchen, if a sous chef tries to blame a commis for a bad dish and the commis pulls out a written record proving exactly who said what and when, that sous chef is done. Not because I am cruel, but because a kitchen runs on trust and accountability. And the moment you throw your own team member under the service pass, you have poisoned the whole brigade. Derek did something far worse than getting the process wrong. He looked a person in the eye and lied in front of witnesses with evidence on the table. That is not a management failure. That is a character failure. And you cannot fix that with a lateral promotion. You muppet. The only thing rawer than Derek's behavior is whatever he orders at a restaurant, because I guarantee that man asked for well done.
Gordon Ramsay with the well done burn, love it. Next call is about a deli worker who had a rude customer complain about how he handled the chicken tenders, and honey, the worker found the most perfect solution. I'm putting this one through to the Rock.
Finally, the Rock has come back to the receptionist's desk.
Rock, honey, I got a deli worker story for you. Rude customer threw a fit about his chicken tenders being touched, so the worker served every single tender to the next guy in line. It is as satisfying as it sounds, sugar.
The Rock is already buckled in. Let's go. So this worker is behind the deli counter, gloves on, handling a lunch rush, and in walks a particular kind of customer. You know this guy. The Rock knows this guy. The guy who asks what something is gets told exactly what it is and then finds a way to make that your fault. He calls him saucy because apparently this guy drowns everything in sauce and still finds something to complain about. The Rock's eyebrow just raised because The Rock has been in restaurants across this great nation, and The Rock has seen this jabroni in every single one of them. He's the guy who orders extra sauce and then complains there's too much sauce. It doesn't matter how much sauce there is, pal. So the worker's bagging up 4 chicken tenders with tongs, and one gloved finger barely grazes one tender. One. And Saucy absolutely loses his mind, demands tenders that the worker hasn't, quote, put his hands all over. He's wearing gloves. Food service gloves. That is literally the system, my friend. The system designed for your protection. The millions and millions of people who have ever worked a food service job are standing up right now because they know they have all met this man and they all had to smile through it. This worker, though, this worker had a plan. Before Saucy can even finish his complaint, the worker turns to the very next customer in line and asks what he wants while the fresh batch gets started. That next guy says, I'll take the rest of those, all of them. The tenders Saucy just rejected, gone, handed cheerfully to someone who appreciates chicken. Worker tells Saucy, don't worry, I won't touch the new ones. Can you smell what the Rock is cooking? Because that right there is a 5-star people's elbow delivered in chicken tender form. The look on Saucy's face when those tenders went to the next guy must have been priceless. Absolutely priceless. Saucy says, that's not what I meant. And then he waited 13 minutes for a fresh batch while everyone around him got served. 13 minutes of standing there with nothing but his own attitude to keep him company. The worker stayed perfectly polite the entire time, technically gave the man exactly what he asked for, brand new, untouched tenders. That is what The Rock calls a championship move. Clean execution, no flagrant fouls, just pure, surgical, beautiful compliance with the stated request. That worker deserves a title belt and a raise. Listen up. The Rock has a very specific problem with people who walk into a service environment and treat the person behind the counter like they are somehow beneath them. You want to talk about hands? This worker had gloves on, medical grade, food safe, regulation approved gloves. The same gloves that have been the standard since before Saucy started drowning everything in extra sauce. If you go into a deli and complain about a gloved hand touching food, you have two choices. You wait for fresh ones like a grown adult, or again, you go somewhere else. What you do not do is make a scene in front of a lunch rush crowd and expect sympathy. Know your role, and for the love of everything holy, cut back on the sauce. 13 minutes, jabroni. Hope they were worth it.
The Rock with the title belt delivery, as always. Now, darlings, story 4 is about a medical records worker who kept getting fax requests for the same documents over and over from a very rude attorney. This one's got some beautiful escalation. Ringing up Uncle Snoop for this one.
Uncle Snoop here? What's cracking?
Snoop, baby, I got a records worker who sent the same 49-page fax so many times the attorney's machine probably needed a nap. The energy on this story is immaculate, honey.
No, I love it already. Run it. So there's a worker at some kind of medical records office, right? And part of the job is responding to legal requests for documents. And this person takes pride in it, nephew. Same day turnaround, next day at the latest. Sends the records fast, sends them clean, keeps it professional. That's somebody who respects their craft. That's a positive energy deposit right there, because you put good work out into the universe supposed to acknowledge that. That's the agreement. That's the social contract. We're going to see how the other side of this equation handled their side of the deal. 2 weeks go by. Some attorney from another state sends a second request for the exact same records. So the worker sends them again, fax and mail, covered all the bases. Then today a third fax rolls in, same records, and on the cover sheet in big capital letters it says, "This is the third request for these records," all uppercase and everything. Attitude fully activated. That's cold. 'Cause that is a negative energy deposit straight into the universe's account. You come at somebody who has been handling their business, handling it fast, handling it right, and you come with caps lock and an attitude. The universe got a receipt for that, nephew. Oh, yes, it do. Now the worker, instead of calling and fussing, goes and digs up all 3 bundles of records, scans every page and counts them up. 49 pages total. Then proceeds to fax all 49 pages back to that attorney's office 4 separate times in one day, and plans to keep on faxing until it's time to go home. You already know that fax machine over at the attorney's office was working overtime for reasons entirely of its own creation. That paper trail was real long, nephew. Real long and real papery. Then it comes out afterward that a coworker had also been sending these same records 3 times each, and the contracted billing department had sent them 3 separate times too. So between everybody, this attorney's office had received these 49 pages something like 9 or 10 times before the worker even started their personal fax campaign today. And the attorney was still sending capitalized complaints. Big karma energy right there. Big, beautiful 49-page karma energy. The universe don't miss, nephew. It just sends another fax. See, here's what I know about this whole situation. Because when you operate from a place of respect, you put that frequency out there, and people who vibe on the same level receive it. This worker was on that frequency, fast turnaround, clean work, professional every step of the way. But that attorney came in hot with the attitude, the caps lock, the accusatory tone, all of that. And what happens when you throw that kind of energy at somebody who did nothing wrong? The universe redirects it, multiply, with interest. Between the worker, the co-worker, and the billing department, those records had been sent out like 12 times before the revenge even started. And the attorney apparently received none of it. That's not just karma, nephew. That's karma with a fax machine and unlimited paper. Stay on the right frequency, cuz the universe is always listening, and sometimes it answers with 49 pages 4 times over. For shizzle. That attorney's fax machine had more of those records than their own client did. Rest in peace, toner cartridge.
Snoop Dogg paying respects to the toner cartridge. Truly a poet. Last story of the day, y'all, and it is a good one. An Army helicopter pilot gets chewed out for using common sense at the wrong coordinates, gets told to follow orders exactly, and then does exactly that. I'm calling up Chuck Norris for this one, and honey, buckle in.
Norris.
Chuck, we got a military story about a helicopter pilot who followed his orders so literally that he landed his squad completely outside the training area, and his commanding officer had absolutely nothing to say about it. Thought you'd appreciate the precision.
That's a pilot who understood the assignment. This story comes from a man's father, Army helicopter pilot, deployed out to a training center in California. A crew before them had been given coordinates for a landing zone. They arrived and found it completely overgrown with trees. They made a sensible call and landed nearby. Their unit was late to a rendezvous. Command did not appreciate the sensible call. Chuck Norris doesn't avoid trees. Trees move when Chuck Norris files a flight plan. So this pilot's crew lands and immediately gets pulled into a meeting room. For 45 minutes, a superior officer explains very clearly that when you are given grid coordinates, you land at those grid coordinates. No deviation, no improvisation. No common sense allowed in this particular jurisdiction. End of story. Full stop. Sit down. Chuck Norris was once given incorrect coordinates. The map apologized and updated itself. The pilot's father gets assigned the very next mission. He does something important first. He confirms the coordinates with the platoon leader 3 separate times before they take off. He wants everyone to be clear on what has been requested. Then he lifts off and puts those soldiers down at exactly the coordinates provided, not near them. Not close enough. Exactly there. Chuck Norris doesn't confirm coordinates 3 times. Coordinates confirm themselves out of respect. 5 minutes into their post-drop training flight, they are ordered back to base. The commander demands to know where the pilot put the squad. The pilot points to a spot on the map that is well outside the entire training area entirely. The commander asks why. The pilot calmly reminds him of the 45-minute lecture they had just received about having zero authority to deviate from given coordinates. The commander has no real response to that. Chuck Norris doesn't win arguments. Arguments simply realize they were wrong and go home. Chuck Norris once received an order that didn't make sense. The order reconsidered its position. This pilot did what Chuck Norris would have done. He verified, he documented, he complied with precision and zero ambiguity. When you tell a trained professional that their expertise does not matter and that they must follow instructions without question, you have removed their discretion. You cannot then be surprised when the discretion is entirely absent. The coordinates were followed. The squad was placed there. That is what was requested. Chuck Norris doesn't make mistakes. But commanders who confuse obedience with competence sometimes make them for him. The correct call was made by the pilot, twice. Chuck Norris doesn't get chewed out for 45 minutes. The chewing apologizes and goes home early.
Chuck Norris with the precision delivery, just like always. Well, honey, that is all 5 of our calls for today, and what a shift it has been. We had Hank Hill defending spreadsheets, Gordon Ramsay absolutely destroying a lying manager, The Rock going to bat for every deli worker who ever lived, Snoop Dogg philosophizing about a fax machine, and Chuck Norris saluting the most literal pilot in Army history. This has been Celebrities React, and I am Dolly, your faithful switchboard operator. Now y'all be sure to comment who Dolly should bring on next. 100 votes and they get the job, hon.